Chapter 23, Whispered Truths, Motoa, a woman at the nurse's station looks up, and Atsumu can't help but notice the way her face lights up. She has that kind of friendly smile that puts people at ease. Her long black hair is tied back in a high ponytail. She's quite pretty. Looks like she's still in her 20s. It's been what, years? She grins wider. Clearly surprised. Really wasn't expecting you today. Oh yeah. Motoa rubs the back of his neck, a little awkwardly. Atsumu has seen that look before and it is quite amusing. It's like Motoa is trying to figure out if he's supposed to apologize or just roll with it. It's been a while. Hi, Aiko. Guess he just rolls with it. You're here to see SakuAtsu-san? Motoa nods, his usual playful energy suddenly dimming. Yeah, just dropping by since I was in the neighborhood. Not sure when I'll get another chance. You know, well, Aiko begins, her face slowly falling. She's not doing so good. Yeah, I've heard. She presses her lips together, and for a moment, they just stare at each other, the air thick with everything unsaid. It's one of those long, heavy silences where words aren't needed. Atsumu feels his chest tighten, the way it does when you're listening in on something you weren't meant to hear. But this is worse. Worse, because it's not just about what's happening to Kayumi's mother. It's in a way about Kayumi himself. And that strikes a chord way too close to home. Atsumu knew from Okura that Kayumi was struggling, but seeing it in the way Motoa and Aiko share this look, makes it all the more real. Aiko breaks the silence with a question that hits Atsumu square in the chest. Are you still in touch with Kayumi? She asks, a bit hesitantly. Motoa nods again, but it's more of a tired gesture this time. He's putting on a tough front, but I think it's wearing him down more than he'd like to show, Aiko says, concern evident in her voice. Motoa sighs, the kind that seems to carry years of worry with it. How much longer does she have? Doctors say, not much, Aiko answers, giving Motoa a look that's equal parts sympathy and sadness. Check in on him. Okay, I know Ashijima-san is also there, but, yeah. Motoa cuts in gently, not needing her to finish the obvious. They both know what she wants to say. Kayumi needs you right now. Atsumu's heart aches at the thought. Kayumi had tried to push him away just the other day, shutting him out with that same cold, distant look he always uses to keep people at arm's length. Atsumu had been furious at the time, not understanding why Kayumi was building that wall up again, especially now. But standing here, watching the way Motoa's shoulders slump just a little and how Aiko's eyes soften with something like pity, Atsumu starts to piece it together. It wasn't just about protecting Atsumu from whatever danger Kayumi thinks is lurking around the corner. It was about protecting himself, too. Kayumi's last bit of family is slipping away, and Atsumu realizes with a pang that Kayumi is probably terrified of losing Atsumu, too. Maybe even more than he's willing to admit to himself. It's starting to make sense now. His inner conflict, the cold distance, the attempts to push Atsumu away. Kayumi is holding on so tight, trying to keep everything from falling apart, and the closer they get, the more he's convinced that something bad is going to happen. Maybe Kayumi thinks that letting Atsumu in means risking another heartbreak, another loss, and if there's one thing Kayumi doesn't need right now, it's another wound. Atsumu swallows hard, trying to push down the lump in his throat. It's not fair. This curse Kayumi's convinced himself he's under, but Atsumu understands it now, and understanding makes it hurt that much more. I'll look out for him. Kiyo will be fine, Motoa finally says, though not even Atsumu can quite believe him. The nurse gives him a supportive nod. She'll be happy to see you, Aiko says, offering a small, hopeful smile. Motoa returns it, though it's tinged with a bittersweet edge. Yeah, I'm sure, he replies with a hint of uncertainty in his voice. It's hard to be sure of anything right now, but it's what they both need to hear. They share a quiet nod before Motoa and Atsumu turn to make their way down the corridor. The sound of their footsteps is the only noise in the otherwise hushed hallway. Atsumu can feel the tension in the air, like a tightrope stretched too thin, and he knows Motoa feels it too. They walk in silence, but just as they approach the door to Motoa's aunt, Motoa slows to a stop. Atsumu glances at him, catching the subtle shift in his expression, the way his brows draw together, a frown tugging at the corners of his mouth. Motoa hesitates for a moment, as if weighing something in his mind, before he finally turns back to Aiko. She looks up and meets his gaze with a questioning expression. Is there something else? She asks, her tone gentle, patient. Motoa hesitates, then offers her a sheepish smile. Actually, yeah. Can I ask you a favor? Aiko's eyes widen slightly, curiosity piqued as she waits for him to continue. Motoa exhales softly, as if bracing himself, before speaking. Could you keep it to yourself that we were here? The door creaks softly as Motoa pushes it open, and the first thing Atsumu notices is the soft, golden light spilling into the room. The sunset paints everything in warm hues, burnt orange and dusky pinks blending together like a watercolor sky. The light catches on the edges of the furniture, casting long shadows that stretch across the floor, and there, by the window, sits a woman whose beauty steals the breath right out of Atsumu's lungs. She's seated in an armchair, her posture straight but somehow relaxed, as if she's content to just sit there and watch the day come to a close. Her grown-out curls, once undoubtedly as dark as Kayumi's, are streaked with silver, catching the light like threads of moonlight woven into her hair. Her face, though marked with the passage of time, holds a grace that's almost ethereal. The lines etched into her skin don't detract from her beauty. Instead, they tell a story of a life lived, of years gone by. Atsunu's heart skips a beat when she turns to look at them. Her eyes, onyx-like Kayumi's, are deep and dark, reflecting the fading sunlight. There's a distant curiosity in them, a sort of vague recognition that's almost haunting. But even with that unfamiliarity, her beauty is undeniable. It's the kind of beauty that makes Atsunu think of ancient deities, timeless, powerful, and just a little out of reach. It reminds him of the first time he saw Kayumi without his mask. That one mission where they were forced to work together. It was a calculated decision. But even then, Atsunu had been completely captivated by how stunning Kayumi was. How the mask hid so much more than just his physical appearance. Seeing his mother right now, Atsunu realizes that Kayumi's beauty is more than just skin deep. It's something inherited, passed down like a precious gift. Atsunu doesn't even realize he's holding his breath until Motoya steps forward, breaking the spell. He approaches her gently, his voice soft as he calls out, "Shiko-san." She blinks, tilting her head slightly as if trying to place him. There's a moment of hesitation, and then she speaks, her voice delicate but steady. "How do you know who I am?" Atsunu's chest tightens again, this time with a pang of sorrow. He can see it now, the way her gaze searches Motoya's face, looking for something familiar but not quite finding it. This is the amnesia everyone had told him about, the trauma that had taken away so much from her. Motoya's smile doesn't falter. Instead, it becomes even softer, more reassuring. He knows he can't reveal too much, so he chooses his words carefully. "I'm a friend of your son's," he says, his tone warm and familiar. "I've heard so much about you, Shiko-san. It's an honor to finally meet you." Her expression shifts slightly, a mix of confusion and something like relief. Her eyes search Motoya's face for a moment longer, then she tilts her head slightly. She nods slowly, as if that explanation makes sense, and her lips curve into a small smile. "Is it Yokozo?" she asks, a flicker of hope lighting up her expression. Motoya's smile softens as he gently shakes his head. "No," he says, his voice kind and understanding. "It's actually Kayumi. Kayumi's friend," she repeats, her voice tinged with a faint, almost wistful tone. "He doesn't talk about his friends much." Motoya chuckles softly, shaking his head and trying to keep the atmosphere light. "He's always been a bit reserved, hasn't he? But he misses you, Shiko-san, a lot." "Oh." Her expression softens, and she looks out the window for a moment, lost in thought. "I miss him too. It's been so long since he last visited," she murmurs. "The only one who comes by is Yokozo. Not even Sachiko has been here for a while." As the words leave her lips, Atsunu's breath catches in his throat once again. She doesn't realize she has mistaken Kayumi for his brother. The realization hits Atsunu like a punch to the gut, filling him with a deep, aching sympathy. He wonders what it must be like for Kayumi to come here, knowing his own mother no longer recognizes him as her son but as someone else entirely. The thought twists something inside him, making it harder to breathe. Motoya doesn't miss a beat. "Kayumi's been busy," he says, his voice still gentle, "but he thinks about you all the time. I know he wishes he could be here more." Shiko sighs softly, her gaze drifting back to Motoya. "I hope he's taking care of himself," she says, her tone full of quiet concern. "He always did work too hard, just like Yokozo." Atsunu's heart clenches. He swallows hard. His mind drifts back to that last encounter with Kayumi, the kiss that started everything and the argument that tore it all apart. Atsunu had been furious, not just because Kayumi had pushed him away, but because Kayumi's words and actions were a tangled mess of contradictions. Kayumi had insisted that he didn't care, that Atsunu should just leave him alone, but his body had betrayed him, holding on to Atsunu with a desperate grip that lingered long after, almost painful in its intensity. It still stings, knowing that Kayumi chose to stay with Ashijima, sacrificing his own happiness, and theirs, to protect everyone else. It makes him feel helpless. Yeah, he's downright pissed, too, because no matter how much he wants to fix things, he doesn't know how. Atsunu doesn't know how to reach Kayumi when Kayumi is so determined to carry the burden alone. So, no, Kayumi is not taking care of himself. Far from it. He's shouldering everything, the responsibility of saving Motoya, protecting Atsunu, and keeping Ashijima at bay, and it's tearing him apart. The frustration bubbles up inside Atsunu, making him feel like he's standing on the edge of a cliff with nowhere to go. Just then, Motoya speaks up, his voice gentle but firm. "He has people looking out for him," he says, glancing meaningfully at Atsunu. "People who care about him more than he knows." Shiko follows Motoya's gaze, her sharp eyes catching on the subtle exchange. A quiet chuckle escapes her, and she hides it behind her fist, her cheeks flushing a delicate shade of pink. "Oh, I see," she murmurs, a playful glint in her eyes as she turns her attention fully to Atsunu. Shiko's smile widens, the warmth in her gaze making Atsunu's nerves settle just a bit. "You must be another one of Kayumi's friends," she says, her tone teasing but kind. He's always been so shy about introducing people. It catches Atsunu off guard, and it shows. Yeah, something like that." Atsunu manages, stammers, sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck and feeling like he's under a spotlight. "I'm Atsunu." Shiko nods, her smile never fading. "Atsunu," she repeats, as if testing the name on her tongue. "It's nice to meet you. You seem like a good friend." someone Kayumi could really use right now. The sincerity in her voice almost undoes him. Atsumu clears his throat, trying to steady himself. I'm trying, he says, and it's the most honest thing he's said all day, but, Kayumi's a bit stubborn. Shiko laughs softly. Oh, I know that all too well, she says, her eyes twinkling with fondness. He's always been that way, even when he was little, but he has a good heart. Atsumu-kun, don't give up on him, okay? Don't give up. For a split second, Atsumu feels something loosen in his chest at her words, like the tension he's been carrying is finally starting to unravel, just a little, but then, it stirs something deep within him. He knows this is not just a simple request, it's a plea, and coming from Kayumi's mother, it hits different. Atsumu's breath catches as he realizes how much this woman, who doesn't even know him, trusts him with something so precious, her son. Atsumu has always worn his heart on his sleeve, a trait that's often gotten him into trouble, but now it feels like a strength, because she sees right through him, past his bravado and his carefully constructed walls, straight to the very core of what he feels for Kayumi. It's startling, almost unsettling, how she picks up on it so easily, as if it's something she's always been able to do, read people, understand them, even in her fragile state. His eyes flicker over her and he takes in the details he hadn't fully absorbed before. Yes, she's still beautiful, radiating a quiet grace, but there's no denying that she's not doing good at all. The lines on her face are deeper, her skin more pallid than he first noticed, and there's a fragility to her that wasn't apparent at first glance. It's then that the words of the nurse echo in his mind. Doctors say she doesn't have long, and yeah, Atsumu believes it. The realization makes his heart clench painfully, because what will happen to Kayumi if she dies? The thought is terrifying, and Atsumu might start to understand the full extent of why Kayumi chose to stay with the Shijima's Yakuza. It's not just to protect Atsumu and Motoa, but also to be close to his mother in her final moments. It's like she's the last thread keeping Kayumi tethered to something real, something human. But if she's gone, Atsumu's gut twists at the thought of Kayumi being left to rot in a Shijima's world, consumed by it with no one to pull him back. The weight of it all settles heavily on Atsumu, and it's only when Shiko speaks again that he's snapped out of his spiraling thoughts. You know, Shiko says softly, apart from Kayumi's cousin, there was only one person with whom Kayumi was close, Wakatoshi-kun. Maybe you know him. He has always been there for Kayumi, ever since they were children. Their friendship goes way back, just like mine did with Wakatoshi's mother. Atsumu blinks, refocusing on her words. Wakatoshi, he repeats, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. A Shijima has always been a thorn in his side, especially when it comes to Kayumi. The tension between them is palpable, and Atsumu knows that a big part of it is exactly because of Kayumi. Even if they don't speak it aloud, it's there, simmering beneath the surface. Yes, Shiko continues, oblivious to the undercurrents of animosity Atsumu feels. Kayumi and Wakatoshi were inseparable as kids, and Wakatoshi's mother, she was my best friend. We were like sisters, but things changed after she passed away and Wakatoshi had to step up, prove himself as the new Kumicho. It's been hard on both of them, I think. Atsumu's mind races, piecing together the fragments of what he knows. A Shijima and Kayumi, they used to be something more than just friends, but it's always been shrouded in secrecy, wrapped up in the complexities of Yakuza politics and personal survival. That much he knows from Kayumi. He wanted to know. A Shijima used Kayumi, and Kayumi let himself be used, knowing full well what it meant. And now, with Shiko's quiet observation, Atsumu feels the weight of it even more. He wonders what Kayumi must have gone through, balancing on that razor's edge between loyalty and self-preservation, between his past with a Shijima and his present with Atsumu. And then there's the fear that if his mother dies, the last tether holding Kayumi to his humanity might snap. What will Kayumi do? Shiko's gaze drifts back toward the window, where the last rays of the sun paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. The soft light casts a warm glow over her features, but there's a shadow in her eyes as she speaks again, her voice low and contemplative. You know, Atsumu-kun, she begins, her tone almost wistful. Kayumi and Wakatoshi, they've always been like two strong, ancient trees with their roots intertwined. They've supported each other for so long, standing tall together through every storm. She pauses, her fingers tracing an invisible pattern on the armrest of her chair. But sometimes, even the strongest trees can start to wither if they are too close, if they share too much of the same soil. Atsumu's brow furrows slightly as he listens, trying to grasp the deeper meaning behind her words. Shiko's eyes remain fixed on the sunset, her expression distant as if she's seeing something far beyond the horizon. They've been through so much together, she continues, her voice softening, and I know Wakatoshi will always be a huge part of Kayumi's life. They are like two stars in the same constellation, always drawn back to each other, no matter how far apart they drift. She sighs, a quiet, resigned sound that makes Atsumu's chest tighten. But sometimes those stars shine too brightly when they are too close, and they burn each other out. Atsumu's heart beats faster as he starts to understand the implications of what she's saying. She knows about a Shijima's hold on Kayumi, the way their past ties them together, and the possessive streak that a Shijima has never really hidden. And she knows that Kayumi lets him, because of their history, because of that deep, unspoken bond they share. But Kayumi, He's meant to grow, to find his own light, Shiko says softly, finally turning her gaze back to Atsumu. I worry that if they stay too close, if they keep leaning on each other the way they always have, they might end up stifling each other instead of flourishing. Wakatoshi-kun is a good man, but I think they need to find their own paths. I don't think he's a good man, Shiko-san. Atsumu swallows, feeling the truth of her words settle in his chest like a heavy stone. He thinks of Kyumi, caught in the grip of Ashijima's world, and wonders if he's the only one who can help Kyumi break free, to find a life that isn't dictated by the shadows of his past. He deserves to be happy. He deserves to be with someone who can help him grow, who won't smother him with the weight of what was, but instead, nourish him with the hope of what could be. Shiko watches him, her eyes gentle but probing, as if she can sense the chaos in his heart. Atsumu-kun, she says softly, and he startles slightly at the sound of his name on her lips. I don't know what exactly is going on between you and my son, but I can tell you care about him, and that's all I can ask for. So please, don't let him lose himself. Atsumu's throat tightens. He swallows hard. I won't. He promises, his voice thick with emotion. I won't give up on him. I promise. He understands now, more than ever, that he can't give up on Kyumi, not just for himself, but for the man Kyumi could become if he's given the chance to truly live, to break free from the ties that bind him to Ashijima. Atsumu realizes, with some sort of bittersweet clarity, that Kyumi doesn't even have to choose him. It's not about being the one Kyumi turns to. It's about giving him the freedom to make that choice in the first place. For Atsumu, it would be enough just to see Kyumi live his life on his own terms, unburdened by the past and the expectations that have been forced upon him. If Kyumi can find a way to truly be happy, to flourish in a world where he's not constantly looking over his shoulder or bound to someone else's ambitions, that would be worth everything, even if it means standing on the sidelines. Atsumu knows he would give anything for Kyumi to be free. Shiko smiles then, a small, sad smile that tugs at something deep within Atsumu. Atsumu, could I ask you one more thing? He blinks, a bit surprised. Of course, if you ever get the chance. She hesitates, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Could you take Kyumi to Niza, to France? Atsumu's eyebrows shoot up in surprise. France? I didn't think. He pauses, trying to picture Kyumi anywhere near a sunny beach, and can't help but let out a soft laugh. Kiyo hates the sun, doesn't he? Shiko chuckles, a sound that is warm and full of fond memories. He likes to act like he does, but deep down, I think he'd love it. He's always wanted to see Europe, and France was at the top of his list. Her gaze drifts towards the window, as if she can see the distant shores from where she's sitting. He might not admit it, but I know he'd be happy there, even if just for a little while. Atsumu's heart warms at the thought, a flicker of something hopeful and light breaking through the heaviness in his chest. He can see it. Kyumi standing on a sunlit beach, the wind tousling his hair, the corners of his mouth twitching up in that rare, soft smile he's seen only a handful of times. Or he pouts, because he hates the wind and because the sun is too bright and because he can't stand the heat and because the water is too wet. But hey, even for that, Atsumu would give anything to make it possible. I'd love to take him there, Atsumu says softly, the idea already taking root in his mind. It's more than just a passing thought now. Shiko's smile deepens, her eyes sparkling with a quiet hope. Thank you, she whispers, her voice barely audible. He needs someone like you. Atsumu nods, and it's only now that he fully understands the depth of what he's promised. He's not just fighting for Kyumi's life. He's fighting for his soul, for the man who once saved him, and for everything that makes him who he is. The sky hangs heavy with dark, oppressive clouds, casting a muted, grey light over the people below. The air is thick with the promise of rain, a mirror to the somber mood that blankets the gathering. The world outside feels like it's holding its breath, mirroring the heavy silence as if nature itself is mourning alongside them. Kyumi stands before the family altar, his posture rigid but his mind adrift. His eyes are fixed on the incense burning in front of him, the smoke curling upwards like wisps of his own scattered thoughts. Each tendril seems to carry with it a piece of his past, flickers of memories and fragments of loss. The scent of the incense mingles with the cool, damp air, creating a dissonant harmony that underscores his grief. He feels like a shadow against the backdrop of the ceremony, his presence almost ghostly in its stillness. The faces around him blur into an indistinct haze as he grapples with the reality that he is now completely alone. It's like Kyumi is caught in an endless storm, with nothing to anchor him and no one to stand by his side. The rain starts to fall, a soft, persistent drizzle that taps against the surrounding canopy like a melancholic rhythm. Kyumi barely registers the sound, lost in the vast emptiness that has taken root inside him. He hopes that wherever his family is now, they have found peace. Peace and solace, a respite from the harshness of the world they left behind. He prays that his sister and brother can finally be happy again, now that their mother is with them, that their parents, reunited at last, are basking in the joy of being together, free from the pain and suffering that mark their final days. Kyumi wishes they don't look back, that they forget about him entirely so he might one day forget about them too, letting the sting of loss fade just a little. He doesn't want them to see how miserable he is doing without them, how broken he feels, how lonely and abandoned. They should be proud of him, but he knows in his current state, that's nearly impossible. In the end, he wasn't able to save any of them. One by one, the attendees begin to leave, their murmured condolences and quiet farewells fading into the background. There was Kageyama, Hoshiumi and Hirugami, if he perceived it correctly. But who cares? It doesn't matter. Nothing matters anymore. The area around the altar empties slowly, until only Ashijima remains by his side. Kyumi stands there, motionless, like a figure of solemnity caught in the mire of his own desolation. He knew this would happen, and yet, Ashijima's presence is a solid anchor in the storm. But even the strength of the Kumicho seems insufficient to pierce through Kyumi's inner turmoil. He feels like he's standing on the edge of a precipice, looking out over an abyss where his hopes and dreams used to reside. The finality of the day hits him like a cold wind, sweeping away the last remnants of his resolve. The rain picks up, drumming softly against the large black umbrella that Ashijima has opened. He moves closer, holding it over both himself and Kyumi, like a silent shield against the downpour. But Kyumi's gaze remains locked on the altar. The rain intensifies, almost like a reflection of the tears he refuses to shed, and the grey sky seems to press closer, suffocating him with its weight. We can stay here as long as you need, Ashijima offers softly, though it's clear from his tone that he understands Kyumi's need for solitude, even if he is unwilling to leave him completely alone. Kyumi's only response is a faint nod, his thoughts too tangled to form coherent words. He is lost in the echoes of his own suffering, struggling to hold on to the fragments of strength he has left. All he can feel right now is this deep void. He's numb, the emotions buried so deep he doesn't know if he'll ever find them again. That is, if he even wants to. When Ashijima's hand settles on his shoulder, it's like a spark igniting a frayed wire. Kyumi flinches violently, the touch setting off a chain reaction of panic that surges through him. His breath catches, and for a moment, he feels like he's drowning. His skin burns and itches and Kyumi has the urge to tear it from his body. Ashijima quickly retracts his hand, holding it up in a gesture of surrender, his expression unreadable. Kyumi spins around, his eyes wild and unfocused, locking onto Ashijima, who's been standing just behind him. His face remains calm, but there's a flicker of something in his eyes. Concern, maybe, understanding, pity. It's hard for Kyumi to tell, and he doesn't care enough to decipher it. After a beat of silence, Ashijima speaks quietly. His voice is steady, like he's trying not to disturb a fragile balance, but it's hard, because he's walking on eggshells, nearing a ticking bomb that's just about to go off. You don't have to hold it all in, Kyumi. It's okay to let go. Kyumi sets his jaw, a muscle tightening as he fights to control his emotions, his fists clenching at his sides. The words hit him like a blunt object, stirring something dangerous inside him. He doesn't want to hear this. Not now. Not from him. His mind snaps back to a memory, to the day Ashijima's mother passed away. He was there, standing by Ashijima's side, just as Ashijima is standing beside him right now. Roles reversed. Kyumi had offered himself then, trying to shoulder some of Ashijima's burden, to ease the weight of the loss. But Ashijima had refused to let himself mourn, had buried it deep, hidden behind that same stoic expression he's wearing now. He hadn't let go, not even for a second. And now, here he is, telling Kyumi to do what he himself had never been able to do. The hypocrisy stings, sharp and cold, cutting through the numbness. How dare he say it's okay to let go when he's never allowed himself that same freedom, when he's never once given Kyumi the space to breathe, to heal, when he's used Kyumi's vulnerabilities against him. Every single time, a bitter thought takes root, growing like a twisted vine. If Kyumi lets himself break now, if he shows even a crack in his armor, Ashijima will see it as an opportunity. He's always been like that, calculating, always knowing when and how to use Kyumi's weaknesses to his advantage. Kyumi had been naive to think that this moment might be different, that perhaps Ashijima would offer something more than just empty words. But he knows better now. He can't afford to let go. If he does, he's afraid there won't be anything left to hold on to. So, he says nothing, just stares at Ashijima, his chest heaving with the effort of keeping everything under control. The rain continues to pour, and the world feels like it's collapsing inward, pressing down on him. Ashijima's gaze lingers on Kyumi, his eyes searching for something beneath the surface, as if trying to peel back the layers of his stoic facade. After a long pause, he speaks with a controlled calm. Get your bike from the Osaka garage, Ashijima instructs. Head to Sendai and check on Motoa. If he's still in a coma, bring him here. Our medical team can provide better care than Oikawa's. You know that. Kyumi's mind stirs uneasily at Ashijima's offer. He knows that Ashijima isn't the type to extend help without reason, especially when it involves someone who's always been a thorn in his side like Motoa. Yet here he is, offering to bring Kyumi's cousin to Tokyo, to make sure he's cared for, even if it means risking confronting Kyumi's conscience over and over again. It's a gesture that throws Kyumi off balance, muddying the already murky waters of his feelings. Because how is he supposed to hate this man, to sever the ties binding them, when Ashijima still shows this level of care for him? The confusion gnaws at Kyumi. His emotions seem like a tangled mess as he tries to reconcile the Ashijima who uses him with the one who would make such an offer. It's almost enough to make Kyumi question his resolve, to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's something left in this connection worth holding on to. Kyumi nods, his face a mask of obedience and gratitude. Then, Ashijima steps closer, their shoes almost touching, and his voice lowers to a more serious tone. Don't do anything stupid, Kayumi, he says, his gaze intense. I can't afford any more complications, and neither can you. I've seen how the weight of loss can change a person. Be careful with your choices. It's a warning, a threat. He knows Ashijima isn't just talking about the choices Kayumi might make. He's laying out the consequences. It's a reminder of the power Ashijima holds over him. A subtle yet unmistakable command to stay in line, to not let his grief drive him to actions that could disrupt the delicate balance they maintain. Kayumi wants to rebel against it, to push back against the control Ashijima exerts, but he also knows how easily that could spiral into something much darker, and he can't afford that. If he lets his emotions get the better of him now, it'll all be for nothing. Ashijima slowly peels his glove off and cups one of Kayumi's cheeks. The touch is unnervingly gentle, at odds with the tension simmering between them. You know that I care about you the most, but it makes Kayumi sick because after all these years, he still can't tell if Ashijima is telling the truth. I told you to lift with your legs, not your back. SakuAtsu grumbles, watching his twin struggle with a particularly heavy box. Osamu shoots him a glare, his brow furrowing in frustration. And I told you to shut your mouth unless you're actually helping, he retorts, managing to hoist the box onto the counter with a grunt. Atsumu smirks and leans against the wall. I am helping. Supervising counts, doesn't it? Osamu rolls his eyes. You're about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Rin, who's been silently unpacking a box of utensils nearby, snorts at the exchange, shaking his head. You two bicker like an old married couple, he comments, his tone dry. More like an old married couple that's sick of each other. Atsumu quips, earning another glare from Osamu. The shop is small but cozy, with wooden shelves lining the walls and a counter that stretches across the front. The twins have been at it for hours, organizing the space to Osamu's liking. The place still smells faintly of fresh paint, and the sound of boxes being shuffled around fills the air. It's a far cry from their usual line of work, one that involves far less bloodshed and a lot more rice. Osamu pauses to survey the room, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. It's coming together, he mutters, more to himself than anyone else. Course it is, Atsumu says, straightening up and grabbing another box. You got the best help around. Yeah, and when are they showing up? Osamu fires back, a smirk tugging at his lips. Suna grins. Oh, Atsumu protests, feigning offense. I'm the one who got us connected with Mian, remember? Osamu snorts, shifting another box into place. Yeah, but it was me he offered the shop to, wasn't it? Guess he has good taste. After all, an eye for quality, you know. Atsumu rolls his eyes but can't hide the smirk. Suna glances over with a pointed look, catching the exchange but choosing to stay silent. His eyes narrow slightly, and Atsumu can tell he's stewing in his own thoughts, though he continues to quietly organize things in the background. The tension is subtle, but it's there, a quiet undercurrent in the room, making the air feel just a bit heavier. Suna's movements are deliberate, almost like he's trying to focus on anything but the conversation, his jaw tight as he stacks boxes with a little more force than necessary. Well, it serves him right for dragging his feet. Suna has been dancing around his feelings for Osamu for ages, and it pisses Atsumu off to no end. They practically act like a couple already, but neither of them has the guts to put a label on it. If Suna keeps hesitating, someone else might just snatch Osamu up, and Atsumu shudders a bit at the thought that this certain someone might be Mian. No. Atsumu decides to ease off, at least for now. As much as he enjoys getting under Rin's skin, he doesn't want to stir up anything that might make things awkward between Osamu and him, especially since Rin is staying the night in their new apartment above the shop. He's still part of Inarizaki, after all, and Atsumu wonders if he will ever have the guts to leave and join the twins in Osaka, or if he'll keep clinging to the old ties, too afraid to make the jump. If Suna stays, Atsumu knows it'll likely mean that he and Osamu are never going to be a real thing. And Osamu, well, Atsumu figures his twin is waiting for that decision too, for better or worse. But all that will have to wait until they have actually dealt with the big three. For now, Atsumu shifts the conversation, not wanting the mood to get any heavier. So, Samu, he starts, washing his hands. Ya got any grand plans for this place, or are you just gonna wing it and hope for the best? Osamu gives his brother a sideways look, one that says he's half expecting the question and half annoyed by it. Grand plans? Huh? Well, I thought I'd start with a nigiri, just like Ma wanted to. Maybe work my way up to takoyaki if I'm feeling fancy. But knowing you, you'll be begging for ramen every other day. Can't help it if I got a refined palate. Ramen's a classic. Samu, you'd be doing a disservice to the people if you don't serve it. Suna chimes in with a deadpan tone. Hate to admit, but yeah. Samu, imagine the headlines. Osaka's finest onigiri shop refuses to serve ramen. Mass outrage ensues. Atsumu snorts. See, even Sunarin agrees with me. Osamu rolls his eyes. Yeah, sure. Whatever. Maybe I'll put it on the menu just so I don't have to listen to you two whine about it. Atsumu walks over to Suna and nudges with his elbow, shit-eating grin on his face. Hear that? We're influencing the menu already. Next up, we'll get him to add carriage and okonomiyaki. Any other requests? Nah. But speaking of plans, Suna starts, smirking as he leans against a stack of boxes. How are you gonna juggle everything? Running around for me and while trying to pull off whatever big scheme you have in mind. You're gonna be his little sidekick, aren't you? Yeah. How's that gonna work? Osamu, never one to miss an opportunity to tease his brother, jumps in with a chuckle. You'll be too busy playing errand boy to even taste the ramen you keep asking for. Atsumu scowls, more out of habit than real irritation. Fucking sidekick, my ass. I've got bigger plans than just running errands. Mian and I, we're talking about something bigger, an independent group, one that can stand on its own, without being tied down by anyone. Suna raises an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but also amused. Oh, so you're gonna be a big shot now, huh? Forming your own little empire with Mian's guys? I can see it now. Atsumu, the great leader of the Osaka underground, too busy to visit his brother's shop. Osamu snickers. Yeah, and I'll be here, slaving away over a hot stove while you're off playing Kingpin. Don't forget where you came from. Atsumu clicks his tongue and crosses his arms, trying to look serious but unable to hide the gleam in his eyes. Laugh it up, you two. Just wait. When this all comes together, you'll see I have a real vision. And besides, it's not like I'm gonna abandon you lot. We're still a team, just with a bit more reach. Suna leans back, arms crossed, his smirk still firmly in place. Yeah, just don't go getting too big for your britches. Tsumu, remember, you're still the guy who couldn't find his keys this morning. Osamu grins, clapping Atsumu on the back. Don't worry, Rin and I will keep you grounded, and when you're off running the show with Mian, I'll keep things running smooth here. Maybe I'll even name a special onigiri after you. How's that for legacy? Rin and Osamu are grinning. Atsumu scowls. I hate you too, like you did on that mission back in Kyoto. Osamu starts, his tone mischievous as he shifts another box into place. The one where you decided you were a ninja? Rin lets out a low chuckle, already catching on to where this is headed. Oh, you mean the one where he tried to scale that wall with a katana in his teeth? What were you even thinking, man? Atsumu rolls his eyes but can't suppress a grin. Oh, I was improvising. You two were taking too long to clear the path, and someone had to take the lead. Improvising. Huh? Osamu snickers, shaking his head. You nearly fell face first into a fountain because you didn't see the guards on the other side. Rin had to cover for your ass with an arrow before you got skewered. Rin smirks, crossing his arms as he leans against a counter. Yeah, and let's not forget you nearly dropped that beloved katana of yours in the process. Could have lost our edge. Literally. Hey, I didn't drop her. Atsumu protests, a bit more defensive now but still grinning. And we got the job done, didn't we? Those guards didn't know what hit them. Yeah, thanks to us. Osamu teases, but I gotta say, you did look ridiculous with Benihime sticking out a yeah mouth like some wannabe samurai. Atsumu smirks. Yeah, just jealous I made it look. He cuts himself off mid-sentence, his gaze snapping to the window as a sudden movement outside catches his attention. His words trail off and the teasing smile slowly slips from his face. Osamu quirks an eyebrow and looks at his brother smugly. You made it look what? Atsumu doesn't answer right away. Actually, he doesn't answer at all. His eyes narrow, trying to make out the figure that's just pulled up on a sports bike. The neon green and black of the bike gleaming faintly through the rain. The rider dismounts, and even through the dusk and the pouring rain, Atsumu can recognize the dark colors, the familiar way the figure moves. His heart skips a beat as realization dawns. What the hell is he doing here? Osamu follows his brother's line of sight, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion. Who's this? Atsumu's voice is barely above a whisper, his breath catching as he murmurs, Omi-kun. And without waiting for a response, he strides toward the door, leaving Osamu and Rin exchanging puzzled looks behind him. The rain pounds against the windows, the figure outside standing still, as if waiting for something, or someone. Atsumu pushes the door open, the bell above it jingling softly, though the sound is quickly swallowed by the heavy rain outside. The figure by the bike doesn't move at first, still as a statue with rain pouring down in torrents, soaking him to the bone. Kyumi slowly removes his helmet, his movements almost mechanical, and he just stands there, helmet in hand, staring at a random spot on the ground. His usually sharp eyes are dull, unfocused, lost somewhere far away. Rain drips down his face, mingling with the strands of black hair that cling to his forehead, but he doesn't seem to notice or care, like he's just a shell of himself. Atsumu's breath catches in his throat. Something's wrong. Kyumi looks completely out of it, like he's been through hell and back, and Atsumu can feel a weird, unsettling sensation bubbling up inside him. It's like a knot tightening in his stomach, a bad feeling he can't quite shake. It feels almost as bad as that one time, when Kyumi stared at him with that look of betrayal. Back when Atsumu shattered the fragile trust that had taken so long to build between them. Back when Kyumi held a gun to his head. That memory hits him hard. His chest tightens with a familiar guilt. The same guilt that still haunts him whenever he sees even a flicker of pain in Kyumi's eyes. The same guilt that hasn't lessened over time, gnawing at him every time he's reminded of the damage he caused. Damage he knows he can never fully repair. Kyumi, he calls out softly, but it's drowned out by the rain. It isn't until Atsumu steps out further into the downpour, the cold rain soaking into his clothes, that Kyumi finally looks up and shit. He doesn't look good. The moment their eyes meet, Atsumu shudders, a full body tremor that he can't control. Kyumi's eyes are usually so intense and clear, but tonight they look empty, tired, haunted, like all the life's been drained out of him. Kayumi blinks, a flicker of recognition passing through his gaze, but then his brows crease into a pained expression, like the weight of the world is pressing down on him and it's so overwhelming that it hurts Atsumu even though he doesn't know what's going on. He can't move. Can't even think properly, he just knows he needs to get closer, needs to do something, anything, to help. Without realizing it, Atsumu steps forward until he's standing directly in front of Kayumi, their faces only inches apart. The rain continues to pour down around them, but Atsumu doesn't feel the cold anymore. His throat is dry, and he feels sick to his stomach. Seeing Kayumi like this, Atsumu clenches his jaw. He has never seen him like this. Absent-mindedly, Kayumi puts the helmet on the seat of his motorcycle and finally breaks the silence. His voice is flat, almost emotionless. When he speaks, "She died." Atsumu's heart drops like a stone. He doesn't need to ask who. He knows Kayumi is talking about his mother and a flood of sorrow washes over him. Not just for Kayumi's loss, but for everything that he's been through. Everything he's still going through. It's not fair. For a moment, Atsumu can't find the right words, so he just stands there, his mind racing, his heart pounding, nausea crawling through his body. Then, finally, Kayumi speaks again, and his voice is barely a whisper. "I didn't know where to go." Atsumu's heart aches, and before he even realizes it, he's reaching out, hesitating just for a second. "Omi, can I touch you?" Kayumi doesn't respond right away. He just stands there, his gaze locked on Atsumu's, but it's like he's not really seeing him. There's something raw and desperate in his eyes, a deep vulnerability that Atsumu has never seen before. Kayumi is usually so composed, always holding himself together, but right now, it's like he's barely holding on. His lips part as if he wants to say something more, but the words seem to get stuck in his throat. After a moment, he finally murmurs, "Please," his voice so soft and strained that it almost breaks Atsumu's heart. It's a single word, but it carries so much weight. Like Kayumi is putting all his trust in Atsumu, hoping for something he's not even sure he deserves. But it's all Atsumu needs to hear. He pulls Kayumi into a bruising hug, wrapping his arms around him as tightly as he can. Immediately, Kayumi buries his face in the crook of Atsumu's neck and his breaths come shaky, uneven. Atsumu can feel the way Kayumi's fingers dig into his clothes, holding on like he's afraid to let go. Like Atsumu is the only thing keeping him grounded. It's only then that Atsumu realizes how much Kayumi is shaking. His body trembles against Atsumu's, and Atsumu holds him even tighter, trying to give him whatever comfort he can, even if it's just his warmth, his presence. The rain continues to pour down, drenching them both, but neither of them moves, standing there in the middle of the storm, clinging to each other like lifelines, and it stings. It stings and wrenches his heart, and for a very odd reason. It's Atsumu who's starting to have a hard time breathing now, because there's an overwhelming urge bubbling up inside him, an urge to snatch Kayumi away from all of this, to hide him somewhere safe, somewhere the world can't touch him because Kayumi deserves everything. And right now, it feels like he's lost it all, and Atsumu doesn't know if he can, if he's able to shield him from this world. Because what if he fails? He's always prided himself on being strong, on protecting the people he cares about, but right now, holding Kayumi like this, he's never felt more powerless. Atsumu's mind races, and a surge of anger, hot and searing, mixes with the helplessness in his chest. He wants to kill every single one of those bastards who have hurt Kayumi, to make them pay for tearing his life apart. He thinks about the people who destroyed Kayumi's family, the ones who scarred him in ways that go far deeper than the physical, and then his thoughts shift to his own rage, the burning hatred he feels for the people who killed his own mother, who kidnapped Osamu. It's in that moment, holding Kayumi as tightly as he can, that Atsumu wishes he could bring them all back just to kill them again. But even as the anger burns inside him, it's overwhelmed by something more intense, more desperate, and it's the need to protect. Atsumu feels like he's clinging to the only two things he has left in this world, Osamu and Kayumi, and if something were to happen to either of them, Atsumu knows he'd never be able to forgive himself. He can't lose them, not now. It hits him then, hard and fast, that he can't let Kayumi or Osamu be part of their plan anymore. The risks are too great. The thought of one of them in the line of fire, of them getting hurt, or worse, makes him sick to his stomach. He's lost them both before, albeit in different ways, but he wouldn't survive it a second time. Kayumi starts to shiver harder against him, and Atsumu's resolve hardens. The only thing that matters right now, though, is getting him out of the rain, out of this cold, and into the warmth where Atsumu can keep him close, where he can make sure nothing else hurts him. "Come on, Omi, let's go inside," Atsumu murmurs softly, his voice gentle but firm. Kayumi doesn't respond right away, just holds on a little tighter, and Atsumu can feel the desperation in the way his fingers clutch at his clothes. Then, still buried in the crook of Atsumu's neck, he nods weakly, but neither of them moves right away. They stay like that for a while longer, just holding on to each other as the rain continues to pour down, soaking them to the bone, and all Atsumu can care about is the man in his arms and the fierce, unshakable need to keep him safe. When Atsumu opens the door to a soft knock, he finds Motoya standing there, red-rimmed eyes giving away the storm of emotions barely held in check, and a bottle of whiskey clutched in his hand. Atsumu feels a sharp pang in his chest, biting the inside of his cheek to choke down his own feelings. It didn't pass him unnoticed that, despite everything, Kayumi himself hadn't even shed a single tear, while Atsumu had been on the brink of losing it several times and apparently, so is Motoa. Inside, after pulling Kayumi in from the rain, they'd showered together, Atsumu wanting to wash away all the pain and grief that clung to them both. He ran his hands over Kayumi's pale skin, feeling like he was trying to scrub off the hurt, the loss, the heavy burden that had settled into Kayumi's bones. The water was hot, almost scalding, but it felt like a necessary burn, something to melt away the numbness that had crept into every inch of Kayumi's body. Atsumu's fingers traced the lines of Kayumi's muscles, lingering on the places that seemed to carry the most weight. Kayumi's hands, usually so precise and controlled, moved slowly, almost reverently, over Atsumu's skin. They paused at the scar of a graze that still lingers on Atsumu's side, a reminder of a time they'd both rather forget. He has frowned as he stared at it, and Atsumu could see the memories flashing in his eyes, but before either of them could get lost in the past, Atsumu pulled Kayumi into a kiss, tender and desperate at the same time, like two beasts licking each other's wounds, trying to heal in the only way they knew how. Their lips moved together, slow and searching, hands roaming over damp skin, seeking comfort and offering it in return. It was intimate, a moment that felt like it was just for them, as if the world outside had ceased to exist, leaving only the two of them in the steamy warmth of the bathroom. Later, Atsumu brought Kayumi a shirt from Osamu's drawer and some spare sweats from Rin. Now, with his hair still damp and emotions barely held in check, Atsumu steps aside to let Motoya in. The painful smile on Motoya's face tugs at something deep inside Atsumu because he can see the grief in the way Motoya's shoulders sag, in the way he carries himself like he's holding the weight of the world. They walk toward the kitchen counter in silence, the only sound the soft padding of their feet on the floor, and just as they enter the room, Kayumi steps out of the bathroom, his gaze meeting Motoya's almost immediately. His damp hair falls over his forehead, and he stops in his tracks when he sees his cousin. Yeah, they both freeze, the room seeming to hold its breath as the two look at each other, the bond of shared loss evident in their eyes. And then, Motoya is the first to move, walking over to Kayumi and pulling him into a tight hug. It's full force, the kind of hug that seems to be trying to squeeze all the pain out, to offer as much comfort as possible. Kayumi frowns at first, stiff in Motoya's embrace, but after a moment, he melts into it, his arms wrapping around his cousin as he hugs him back just as tightly. Atsumu watches them with a wrenched heart and a twist in his stomach. It's a bittersweet moment, seeing Kayumi finally allow himself to be held, to be comforted. He tears his gaze away when it almost gets too much, focusing instead on getting glasses for the three of them, his hands shaking slightly as he sets them on the counter. Atsumu made sure Motoya was coming over, knowing deep down that Kayumi needed him here, whether Kayumi would admit it or not. He has texted Motoya earlier, a short, somber message explaining what had happened, hoping that his presence might help Kayumi to calm down. Atsumu wants to remind him that he isn't alone in this. Atsumu is here, and Motoya is here, both still alive, still breathing, ready to support him however they can. After the shower, when Atsumu has gone to grab some clothes for Kayumi, he checked his phone and saw a message from Osamu. It was simple but said everything Atsumu needed to hear. They are spending the night at Rin's apartment in Inarizuki, giving Atsumu and Kayumi the space they needed. He sent him a quick THX back and mentally noted to kick Rin's ass if he does anything stupid. Now, the three of them are sitting at the kitchen counter, nursing glasses of whiskey. Across from him, Motoya struggles to keep a straight face every time he brings the drink to his lips, contorting like someone who'd accidentally bitten into a lemon. Atsumu can't help but chuckle under his breath each time, shaking his head at how terrible Motoya is at hiding his discomfort, and hey, even Kayumi's lips quirk up in amusement. You don't gotta drink it if you're suffering that much, you know, Atsumu teases, his voice lighter than it had been in hours. Motoya grumbles, lifting the glass again with exaggerated determination. I'm fine, it's growing on me. Kayumi's lips twitch into something almost resembling a smile, the smallest curve, but it's the first real crack in his otherwise impassive expression since he arrived. Atsumu notices it immediately, his heart swelling a little at the sight. Finally, something's cutting through. Well, when you pass out from all that whiskey, don't expect me to drag you home, Atsumu quips, taking another sip from his own glass, enjoying the way it burns just enough to keep him grounded. Motoya rolls his eyes, but he has that spark of mischief back. He laughs and shakes his head. This actually reminds me of one of our first missions, back when I thought I was hot shit with 2 katanas. He leans back in his chair, a grin spreading across his face. Kayumi here almost had to drag me home that night. Kayumi looks over at him, eyebrows slightly raised, and for the first time all night, his voice doesn't sound so distant when he replies, you almost sliced your own leg off. Motoya winces at the reminder. Hey, I was still figuring it out. It was a learning experience. You sucked, Motoya. Actually, you still do. Atsumu butts in and Kayumi's smirk widens, the corners of his mouth lifting just enough to be noticeable, and it makes Atsumu proud. Hey, Motoya protests, his voice rising in playful indignation. I'm not that bad, okay? Matter of opinion. Fuck you. Kyo. Motoya snaps back, though his eyes are gleaming with good humor. Atsumu can't help but laugh. A genuine, deep laugh that echoes through the kitchen and brings some much needed warmth into the space, and Kyumi joins in, chuckling lightly as he turns his face away from them. Atsumu thinks he's the most beautiful man he's ever seen. You know, it's a good thing auntie taught me how to actually use a gun properly. Motoya, still grinning, shakes his head at the memory. Otherwise, I'd probably have more than just a few scars to show for it. Kyumi's smirk returns, sharper this time. She always had an eye for the bigger picture. She knew you'd handle pistols better than swinging around something you could barely lift. Motoya laughs, the sound softer, more nostalgic. Yeah, she was something else. Could spot talent, well, or the lack of it, from a mile away. Kyumi's eyes soften at the mention of his mother. There's a hint of pride there too, mingling with the grief that still lingers. Atsumu catches the look and feels another pang in his chest, but he doesn't say anything. He watches the exchange with a quiet sense of awe, his heart swelling as he takes in the sight of Kyumi, relaxed and almost at ease for the first time in what feels like ages. It's moments like this, when Kyumi's guard drops just enough to let a glimpse of the man beneath the armor show, that Atsumu cherishes most. He loves seeing Kyumi like this, unburdened, even if only for a fleeting moment. In these rare instances, when Kyumi allows himself to simply be, Atsumu can't help but feel a fierce, protective love for him. He knows how much Kyumi has carried, how many burdens he's shouldered for the sake of others, and it tears at him to think of all the years Kyumi spent locked away inside himself, never truly free. Kyumi deserves so much more than the life he's been dealt, and Atsumu wishes, more than anything, that he could give it to him. Yeah. As he watches Kyumi laugh softly at something Motoya says, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way that makes Atsumu's chest tighten, he makes a silent promise to himself. He'll do whatever it takes to protect this, to protect him, because Kyumi deserves more than just survival. He deserves to reclaim the light that was stolen from him, to live a life unburdened by the shadows of his past. And in that twisted, bittersweet way, it aches Atsumu's heart that Kyumi has to fight so hard for something that should come naturally to everyone else. But tonight, just for a little while, he's grateful that Kyumi can simply exist without these shadows looming over him. It's when the clock strikes past 3 a.m. that Motoya finally stands up, stretching his arms over his head. He's not buzzed, he barely drank enough whiskey, but he's tired, so he grabs his jacket, giving Kyumi a meaningful look before stepping toward the door. Take care, okay, he says, his tone softer than usual, but it carries a weight behind it. He doesn't wait for an answer. They both know what he means. Kyumi nods, watching as Motoya leaves the apartment, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Atsumu lingers for a moment in the kitchen, watching Kyumi from behind, and feels that familiar need to be close to him, to offer more comfort than words can provide. Wash up first and get some rest. Omi, I'll clean up here and join you in a bit, Atsumu says when Kyumi turns around. He nods and Atsumu watches him go into the bathroom. Atsumu starts cleaning up the kitchen, putting away glasses and wiping down the counters, and once everything is clean, he washes up as well. He stares at his reflection for a moment longer than usual and lets the cool water splash against his face. He sighs. Something feels off. He heads to the bedroom where the soft glow of the bedside lamp casts a gentle light over the room. Kyumi is already under the covers, lying on his side and glancing at Atsumu, his disheveled hair splayed slightly across the pillow. Atsumu's cheeks start to burn. Kyumi will always take his breath away. Atsumu slips under the covers next to him and is grateful for the cool sheets against his almost hot skin. He shifts closer to Kyumi, his heart swelling as he reaches out to brush his fingers softly against Kyumi's cheek. The touch is feather light, but Kyumi responds immediately, his eyes fluttering closed in bliss as he leans into the caress. Atsumu marvels at the softness of his skin, the way his breath hitches ever so slightly. In the dim light, Kyumi's features are more defined, his eyes framed by long lashes and the curve of his lips daring to be kissed. Atsumu can't help but think how beautiful Kyumi is. He's always been drawn to him, but tonight, in this quiet moment, he's struck by just how much he wants to savor every detail, to memorize the way Kyumi looks right now, serene, untouched by the world outside this room. After a few heartbeats, Kyumi's eyes flutter open, and Atsumu feels his stomach twist into knots. There's an unmistakable weariness in those dark eyes, a deep exhaustion that seems to have settled in his bones. Atsumu notices the faint redness in Kyumi's left eye, tiny veins that must have burst from the strain of everything weighing on him. And damn, it reminds him too much of how Osamu looked back then, after his argument with Suna, just before he was kidnapped. Oh. Atsumu has a very bad feeling. You doing okay? He asks and leans in closer, his voice a soft murmur, not daring to disturb the silence of the night. Kyumi's gaze meets his, and he gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yeah, he answers barely above a whisper. Just tired. Atsumu can tell there's more behind Kyumi's simple answer. The way his eyes flicker with something unsaid, the way his gaze keeps drifting as if lost in thought. Atsumu has seen this before. Hell, he himself has been there. All the times he himself was tired. All the times he made Osamu and Suna believe he was okay when he wasn't. Atsumu didn't want to admit it to himself back then, but here and now with Kyumi showing exactly the same behavior, he realizes how lost he really felt back then, without him, and just the thought of reverting back to such a state because he can't protect Kyumi from all that is to come makes him feel sick. So incredibly sick. Kyumi might say he's just tired, but Atsumu knows better. He leans in closer, his voice as soft as a whisper, careful not to break the fragile moment between them. What's going on in that head of yours, Omi? Talk to me. Kyumi's eyes meet his for a brief second before they dart away, his brows furrowing in hesitation, and Atsumu's heart skips a beat. A cruel, piercing flicker of panic rises in his chest. What is Kyumi not telling him? Atsumu starts to fear the worst. Maybe Kyumi is pulling away for good this time. Maybe he's questioning their path. Or maybe it's something even darker lurking in his mind. Before Kyumi can say anything, Atsumu sits up quickly, his hand reaching out to cup Kyumi's face. Hey, he says, and his voice is a bit firmer but still gentle. You know you can be honest with me, right? Whatever it is, you don't have to keep it in. Talk to me. Kyumi hesitates, then slowly sits up as well and takes Atsumu's hand in his own. His thumb brushes over the back of Atsumu's hand, and he stares at it, as if searching for the right words. He starts but cuts himself off immediately. His frown deepens, and after a few long moments, he finally speaks again, his voice small and his gaze still averted from Atsumu. I don't know if I can do this. Atsumu, do what? He asks, leaning in closer, desperate to understand. Atsumu's heart tightens, confusion flashing across his face. This isn't good. Dread sinks into his bones. Is this about them? Is it about protecting Motoa? Does Kyumi still think that this thing going on between them isn't right? What does he mean? Atsumu doesn't understand. Kyumi lifts his gaze, locking eyes with Atsumu, and the raw vulnerability there makes Atsumu's breath catch. I don't think I can help you with a Shijima. Kyumi admits, the words heavy with a pain that runs deep. Atsumu feels his chest constrict. Shit. He feels sick. He can see the confliction in Kyumi's eyes, the confusion and heartache swirling together. It's like Kyumi is caught in the mess of his own feelings, tangled between what he knows he should do and what his heart is telling him to do, and it's tearing him apart. Atsumu can see it. It tears the thin threads that still hold him together, and he is so close to breaking apart. Atsumu hates it. He aches for him, not just because of the pain Kyumi is in, but because, after everything, Kyumi still can't fully let go of a Shijima, and Atsumu he doesn't understand, and at the same time, he does. Because after all, the two of them have something that runs too deep. They've known each other too long for Atsumu to have any idea what's really going on between them, and in the end, Kyumi has always been aware of what he's doing. Atsumu trusts him. He trusts him even now, in this very moment, when Kyumi doesn't seem to know what to do anymore. The thought that Kyumi still harbors some feelings for that bastard, whatever they might be, stings somehow, sharp and deep, but Atsumu forces himself to push it aside. Now is not the time to let that hurt him. Instead, there's a small, almost guilty sense of relief that washes over Atsumu, because if Kyumi can't do it, then maybe, just maybe, he'll stay out of this mess altogether. And that's exactly what Atsumu wanted, right? To keep Kyumi safe, to keep him from getting caught up in the storm that's brewing. Atsumu's thoughts drift briefly to Ikoa and the plan they've been working on. They'll find a way to handle this without Kyumi. He's pretty sure of that. Atsumu isn't alone in this fight. He has people by his side. People who are just as determined to see this through. And once it's over, once the dust has settled, Atsumu will take Kyumi far away from all of this. They'll find a place to rest, and Atsumu will kiss him every chance he gets, until the weight of the world melts away. So, he nods, slowly, his voice soft but filled with reassurance. Okay, he whispers, his gaze fond. Yeah, of course. You don't have to do this, Omi. I don't expect you to bring him down. Kyumi's eyes search Atsumu's, as if looking for any trace of disappointment, but there's none to be found. Atsumu leans in and presses a gentle kiss to Kyumi's lips, soft and tender, and in that very moment, the world around them fades away, the simple touch becoming the only thing that matters, a sensation they both find irresistible and deeply comforting. When Atsumu pulls back, he rests his forehead against Kyumi's, his breath mingling with Kyumi's in the quiet of the night. His chest feels tight, and that odd feeling in his stomach still hasn't gone away, but he chokes all of this down, because with Kyumi not joining them in this battle, there is hope. We'll be okay, Atsumu whispers, his voice steady, even if his heart is still racing. I promise. And for the first time in what feels like forever, they both allow themselves to believe it.